morning, everyone. Good morning. He is risen. That was just for the church people. If you're new here, you don't know what that is. That's a little code. That's how we can tell who the church people are. On Easter, we say that as we are here to celebrate the risen Christ. And I am just so grateful for Owen. Thank you, Owen, for sharing your story and for Compassion. My wife and I, we sponsored a number of kids with Compassion. The first person we sponsored was Radit in Ethiopia. She was born HIV positive, and she was raised by her sister. Both her parents had died. And I personally got to go see her 3 separate times in Ethiopia as she was growing up. And so I got to see firsthand the impact of Compassion on her life. And I think I've been to maybe 18 different sites around the world where Compassion does their work. And so I can stand to personally testify to the validity of their work. And I know in church, many of you maybe don't come to church normally, or you came with a friend, or you got tricked somehow into being here. And so you don't necessarily trust churches with your money. Give them your money today. Seriously, go and sponsor a child. It'll change somebody's life. So here we are. I'm sorry, I'm doing my very best. Here we are on Easter Sunday, and if you didn't pay attention to the text that Tom read, let me repeat back to you some of the components of what he shared. He shared what is an audacious set of claims. Here's what that text said: that God entered human history in the person of Jesus Christ. God wrapped in human flesh, lived among us and modeled a way of life in Jesus. He suffered and died, not just any death, but a horrific death where he was tortured, humiliated, and crucified in public, died, nails driven into his hand, into his feet, a spear driven into his side. And the last claim, the craziest of all, that on the 3rd day, he rose again. Paul says that our faith, the faith that we have in God, is found in this message in Jesus Christ. Born of a virgin, crucified, dead and buried, and ascended, risen, resurrected to the right hand of the Father. These are exceptional claims, are they not? Sort of crazy claims, if you think about it. Crazy claims. And Paul goes so far as to say that this is the center of our faith, that this man, Jesus, was not just a good teacher. He was not offering another nice philosophy. That Jesus stands apart from all of the other religious traditions that offer us ways of understanding God or trying to live morally or making ourselves acceptable to God. That Jesus stands apart from all of these messages and says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You come to the Father through me. I have done something for you that you cannot do for yourself. And this is what we are to believe. It would only be normal, honestly, intellectually honest, to doubt a little bit. I mean, if you're here and you weren't raised in church or you're not sure what you think about any of this, the claims I just made are crazy claims. They're intense claims from thousands of years ago. If you take them seriously, you should hesitate, because it's a strange thing to claim that somebody died and rose again. That's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, have you been with anybody dying? I'm with people who are dying a lot. That's part of my job. I'm in weddings and funerals, and I'm sitting with people in hospitals. I've watched a lot of people die, and something I've noticed is they don't come back. They stay dead. That's my experience. Is that your experience? Dead people stay dead. Yeah, okay. And here's the thing. It's pretty consistent, everyone we know is going to die. You are going to die. Actually, to be more technical, you're dying now. Like right now, you're slowly dying. Every breath is closer to death. Every heartbeat, again, still dying now. Okay, so that's consistent. So when we say, oh, this one guy, he died and he rose from the dead, it is natural, if not normal, frankly, just intellectually honest to pause. Say, I don't know if I believe that. It's healthy to doubt. And I don't know about you, but I think we're living in a current cultural moment where it's getting healthier and healthier to doubt. The way that the internet lies to us. I mean, if you're the kind of person that just believes everything the internet tells you, your life is not going very well. You're living a very difficult life. The amount of lying is just going up exponentially, and our ability to access it. I bet you if I polled this room and I just went around and said, how many different ways have you been tricked in the last few years by something? I think everybody in this room would have to admit you got tricked by something. Some sales pitch, some mockumentary. How many of you thought there was Megalodon for real? Some of you know the Megalodon thing? You know that thing? They made the fake documentary. Lots of people were tricked. If you weren't tricked by that one, how about mermaids? Anybody here tricked by the mermaid documentary? Anybody? Nobody wants to admit it publicly? There's a couple. Okay, that's right. Brave. Just tell the truth. It's okay. Get it out. Get it out. We've all been tricked by something in the last bit. And I'll tell you what, if you haven't been tricked recently, the way AI is developing is utterly terrifying. Like the way that your eyes can fool you. I'm going to confess my humiliation and how I got tricked. I got tricked pretty bad, okay? It was a bad one. It was bad enough that I shared it with people, okay? That's when you really got tricked. I was genuinely tricked by the AI mock-up of Theo Vaughn. You know Theo Vaughn? Theo Vaughn's a stand-up comedian, a podcaster, and there was an AI video they made of him as a young preacher and then as a Christian artist. Anybody see this thing? I had it sent to me like a dozen times. They're like, check this out, man. Like Theo Vaughn, like the podcaster, comedian. He was actually like this really intense Christian as a kid, and he was a singer. If you want to entertain yourself, you can look that up. I was dumb enough to send it to people like, did you guys know this? And it was like 3 in. Somebody was like, Jay, come on, man. Like one Google search, one, Jay. That's all it takes. One Google search, and you could have saved yourself the humiliation. But I guess what I'm trying to say is doubt can be healthy. It's healthy in a world where we're being fed half-truths or outright lies to hesitate, to take a second, to ask another question, to doubt. And what I find amazing about the Scriptures is how often the Scriptures does not go attack anyone for their doubt, but actually how many people in the story of the Bible, their doubt actually leads them to deeper, stronger faith. The places you doubt can lead you to depth, because the places of doubt can lead you to an honest examination of the truth. One of the most famous doubters is one that I would like to look at with you just very briefly this morning. He's actually almost solely known for doubt, which is sad, right? I mean, like, you know, how many of you would want to be known by your worst moment? We've all had a worst moment. Everyone in this room's had a worst moment. Like maybe it was when you went up to give that speech in middle school and your pants fell down. Or that time you spilled food on yourself at the important, like, family celebration. Everyone's like, remember that time you had, like, hot chocolate all over you? You know, like, and that becomes, like, now you're bare butt Johnny or whatever, right? Like, that's the worst. Like, that's the worst. Well, that is exactly what happens to this poor guy. He becomes doubting Thomas Because in the account in John chapter 20, Jesus is resurrected. He shows himself to the disciples, but Thomas isn't there. So he shows himself to the rest. Thomas isn't even in the room. And Thomas shows back up, and they're like, you're not going to believe it. We saw Jesus. And that's where we pick up. In John chapter 20, verse 24, John writes this. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. And then here it is. He turns and looks right at Thomas. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. By the way, that's us. Jesus is referring to those who would believe, who had not seen in the way Thomas had. Now again, it's hard. It's easy to be hard on Thomas. It's a little too easy. Just like it would be easy for me to be hard on you on your worst day or your worst moment. But it's worth exploring some of what's going on here. And different commentators and pastors have conjectured forever as to why Thomas wasn't in the room at the first appearance. And this is where you fill in preacher jokes of various kinds. Like he was out getting the takeout. Ha ha ha. Or whatever, right? There's any number of jokes. Nobody really knows. The text doesn't tell us. Early church fathers do conjecture as to why Thomas wasn't in the room and probably had talked to people who talked to Thomas to describe why he wasn't in the room. So early church fathers make the argument that Thomas wasn't there because he was sad and wanted to be alone. See, for many of us, our grief and our sadness isolates us. Have you ever felt sad and disappointed, and so you just went to be alone? Yeah? Some of you are like that. So, you're just like, I just want to withdraw. I just want to go sleep. I want to go for a walk. I don't want to be here in the noise and the bustle and all the conjecture. Actually, I don't want to manage everybody else's emotions while I'm trying to process my own emotions. I'd rather scroll through TikTok or veg out watching some Netflix. Anybody? We've all done some version of this. It's normal to want to withdraw. And then after he's withdrawn and he's a little sad, and he comes into a room of a bunch of people that are really excited. I mean, it completely separates him. He goes from withdrawing in his sadness, now coming back and meeting a bunch of people. You're not going to believe it. He's alive. And he's like, oh my. And you can imagine that the next thing he says, he blurts out. It would match someone just sort of blurting something out, because frankly, what he blurts out is strange. He says, unless I can stick my fingers in his hands, and then my hand, his whole hand in his side, gross. That's gross. Why is he saying that? It's so silly. It would make sense if he feels reactive. He feels a little bit separated. He's kind of lashing out a little bit. He's agitated. I mean, I don't know if you know anyone, or maybe it's you, that you learn what you are thinking by talking. Don't look at your spouse. Don't look at your spouse. I watched the room. You're like, that's you. That is definitely you. They know. They already know. You don't have to point at them. Okay, you don't even know what you're thinking until you say it out loud. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I guess that's what I'm thinking. And you can imagine Thomas doing that. He just sort of reacts like, oh, yeah, you guys are all so happy. Well, I'll believe it. I'll believe it if I get to put my fingers right in his hands and my whole hand in his side. And they're like, gosh, Thomas, that's gross. But sure enough, a week later, he shows up And he zeroes in right on Thomas and says, that thing you asked for? That evidence you need? Come here. Do it. Go ahead, do it. And you just imagine Thomas like, I'm so sorry. I do not want to stick my hand in your side. That is so gross and weird. I am so sorry, my Lord, my God. See, Jesus doesn't rebuke him because he didn't get to see. He instead says, you want the evidence? Come get it. I'm not afraid to do this with you. Come and get it. And throughout church history and throughout the history since the resurrection to present, many people have asked, come on, I need at least some evidence for this. I would like to suggest to you, specifically if you're here and you're a person that doubts, and I've already established it makes sense that you should doubt. I would like to suggest to you that your doubt can move you toward faith. That there is a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence in the historical record that can lead you to the credibility of the death and the resurrection of Jesus. A lot. More than you can imagine. I just have a few things that you can consider. First of all, how about just the empty tomb? The fact that no one produces a body. They could have just easily produced a body. They didn't. We have no record of anyone producing a body. How about the fact that there are eyewitnesses? The passage that Tom read earlier, 500 different people, Paul says, in the letter to the Corinthians, saw him at the same time. Paul is writing at a time that anyone could have gone and interviewed those people. Plus, you have then the disciples themselves, not just their testimony about the risen Christ, but the fact that their lives transform in such a dramatic way that they go throughout the entire world, and 11 of the 12, or it would be 10 of the 11, I guess, if you take Judas off, and a lie. But nobody dies for a lie that they know is a lie. These guys were willing to be clubbed to death, speared, lit on fire, burned in oil, crucified, upside down, on a cross in every different way because they had seen the risen Christ. And I know we made fun of Thomas, and we're going to start a series next week. We're going to look at all of the apostles and where they went with their faith. Thomas, being doubting Thomas, who then believes, goes the furthest, according to church history, of any of the disciples, the apostles. He goes all the way to southern India, which, by the way, is a long way by plane, let alone on foot. Thomas goes all the way to southern India. There are believers in southern India who trace their lineage to Thomas coming and preaching the gospel. I've been to some of those churches. They were transformed. And then if it's not the disciples themselves, how do you make sense of the early church? Uneducated people who had no money, transformed, literally turned the world on its ear. The entire world has been transformed by uneducated, non-interesting people from the middle of nowhere. They've changed the world all the way up to this day where we talk about compassion. How do you make sense of that if they are not testifying to the risen Christ under the power of the Spirit? And of course, there's a testimony throughout history of people who have encountered this risen Christ. Frankly, in this room today, if we had time to pass the mic around, we would hear story after story after story of people who have encountered the risen Christ. The testimony runs to this day. Listen, your doubt can lead you to faith. If you're willing to ask, if you're willing to look, if you're willing to search. I can remember sitting with a guy that became a friend of mine. I studied philosophy at the Ohio State University. Turns out they're national champions. You know, we can talk about that some other time if you want to hear about it. But I studied philosophy there, and I remember sitting with my TA, who at the time I thought was ancient. He's in his late 20s probably at the time. I'm like, this is such an old guy. And I was sharing my faith. I was talking to him about Jesus. And I'll never forget him looking at me and just saying, Jay, I want to believe. It's just so hard to believe. Like, the thing you're saying sounds interesting. And I remember saying to him, doubt is normal. Have you looked into the evidence? And what's amazing is even in the last couple decades, the amount of intellectual scholars who are looking into the evidence and are encountering the risen Christ. It's shocking. Christianity Today recently did an article where they described some of these prominent scholars who are recently coming to faith. Let me just tell you a couple really quickly. One guy named A.N. Wilson, he's an Oxford graduate. He was a former classmate of Richard Dawkins. And he was a very cerebral writer about history and philosophy, different kinds of things. He's a self-described atheist. He wrote a book titled Why We Should Try to Live Without It, Religion. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so he's like, I'm against religion. Yet, then in 2009, he wrote that book in 1991. 2009, he wrote an article that's titled Why I Believe Again. As he started to investigate faith, specifically the witness of the church throughout centuries, he became convinced of the evidence of the resurrection. He said this, I found it impossible not to realize that all of life, all being derives from God. And he said, of all the human qualities that have to be denied if you embrace the bleak, muddled creed of materialistic atheism. He says it like this, human beings are very much more than collections of meat. It's good. He says we're spiritual beings. And the religion of the incarnation, asserting that God made humanity in his image, continually restores humanity in his image, is simply true. As a working blueprint for life, as a template against which to measure experience, it all fits. Maybe some of you would know the man named Tom Holland. You know him, the historian, pretty popular, well-known historian who clearly articulated his atheist beliefs all through his scholarship. Yet, in 2016, he just posted an article titled, Why I Was Wrong About Christianity. Tom Holland then, through his study of history, said, there is no way to make sense of this transformative power known as the Church of Jesus Christ unless somehow God was fueling it. And over, when he kept looking at the testimony of early believers, how they tied their faith to the resurrection, he said, this just has to be true. In an interview, right after writing that article, he says, I have come to the conclusion that essentially, I guess I'm a Christian. Remember, you're allowed to doubt a little bit. You are allowed to doubt a little bit because if you're doubting authentically and honestly, if you search, you will find what you seek. One last one. Does anyone know the new atheist thinker, Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Anybody read her stuff? Anybody here? Any nerds among us? No? Okay, so this part's just for me. I'll go quickly. Ali as a Muslim scholar. Ali was described by Christopher Hitchens as the most important public intellectual out of Africa. So she's like a really big deal. And so very popular in the atheist circles. 2023, she wrote a new essay called Why I'm Now a Christian. Ali had studied the evidence, looked at all of the different arguments for faith and the historical record, and then, as she opened up her heart, started to have encounters with the risen Christ. Listen, if you doubt, it's fine as long as you seek. Seek and you will find, says Jesus. The evidence is available even today, even this morning. It's possible that there's people in this room, there are many of you in this room saying, why not today? Why wouldn't I just give my life to Jesus? Why wouldn't I just allow him to come and show himself to me? And you might be surprised, even in this room this very morning, the risen Christ is among us. Do not be surprised if you encounter him, if you will let yourself, if you will allow it, if you will turn your doubt and allow for faith. Do not be surprised if every single thing changes in this room. And yet, There are many of you in this room that you've already done that. You're like, I already believe, Jay. This is really good for somebody else. But the truth is, we all have different parts that we doubt. We have different places where we doubt. And I just want to remind you again, this thing that we believe is true. I know everyone in this room has some level of discouragement. You have places where things don't work. You have places where things aren't going the way you want them to go. And I want to remind you that Christ is risen. He is ascended. He is seated at the right hand of the Father and is interceding for you every day. In a day not long from this one, he will return. And he will make all things new again. And all that is broken will be made right. And all that is in pain and it's in your body that doesn't work and in your relationships that don't work and in our economies and our governments that don't work, they will all set to right. And all of this will be but a strange dream. And may you live every day in light of that day, for that day is more real than this one. For he is alive, and he is worth giving all of your life to. That philosophy friend of mine, one of the essays he would have us read was by a philosopher named Anthony Flew, a famous atheist. And I'll never forget one day seeing in the news that Anthony Flew had given his life to Christ. So I called that guy, like, hey. He's like, I know where you're calling. I also saw the article, and I said, so what do you think? I mean, and he goes, man, all I know is we're dropping like flies. We're dropping like flies out here. People are coming to Jesus left and right. I don't know what to do. I'm happy to report he did eventually give his life to Jesus. Honestly, because out of just honest intellectual curiosity. And then he did have a couple encounters with the risen Christ. So today, if you're here and you've been a person who doubt, why not ask for what you want and open your heart to Jesus? It could change everything for you. Can we pray together for a moment? If you just want to bow your heads to pray with me. And I want you to pray with me, especially if you're someone who's far from a life with God. You came here not sure you're a believer, or you've been far from a life with God. Just pray with me. Lord Jesus, risen Lord, come and show yourself to me. You can pray this way, like Thomas, I've doubted, but I want to believe. Show me you are real. Enter into my life that I might walk with you.